Hello, ladies, theydies, and gentlethems. Welcome to Wait, Let Me Think, a journal podcast where I get to open up, critically reflect, and shamelessly ramble as I do anyway. So, on this edition of Wait, Let Me Think, I've asked those of you who follow me on Instagram to send in some questions or advice that you would ask either your future self or a group of trusted adults. And this is specifically advice for teens and teenhood and getting over your teenage years, but this is just really about growing up and things like that. I have 3 questions that I'm answering in this episode, and other questions will be answered in the upcoming ones. Enjoy! So in this episode, I thought I would put the focus away from me for a while. I feel like having a YouTube channel is the ultimate confrontation of having self-centric content out there in the world and believing that it's worthy. Anyways, I just said I wasn't going to make it about me, and now I'm making it about me. Welcome, it's a Leo's world, and you're just living in it. I thought for this episode I would ask all of you beautiful people on Instagram and also on my sister's Instagram, because this video is about giving advice to teens, including my teenage self. I've got a few questions in here sprinkled that aren't other people's but my own, and questions that I would have loved to ask my adult self. My only qualifications for this job is the fact that I have thankfully passed my hellish teen years. But other than that, I am not a professional in any way. I, as you know, am just a person in their little corner of the internet. So please do not let my advice or my thoughts be the be-all end-all of this conversation. And of course, if you have your own answers that you feel like could go well in tandem with mine or just are better than mine in general, please do share, especially if you feel like you've got more experience in whatever field we will be bringing up today. With that being said, let's get into our first question, which is, what is it actually like to start living on your own? Now, this is a very, very interesting question that I would love to ask myself later. I have lived on my own for a couple of years when I first started university, but since I've started my master's, I've moved back in with my parents because they've had to move back to the Netherlands. So I can only speak on my limited knowledge when I was first starting out, and this was when I was like 18. I was fresh. I didn't have any other experience of being outside of the home. I think the longest that I had been out of the house was like a week during a school trip or something like that. And to be honest, it was frightening. I actually didn't know what to do with myself. I had roommates for most of it, and even then I didn't know what to do with the quiet. I didn't know what to do with my space because I didn't understand that I could just take charge of my space and move things around myself and choose what I wanted to have in my space myself until I got sick and tired of just seeing the same white wall for 6 months. It is definitely like getting your wings clipped off. There are a lot of things, of course, practically that go into it, like learning how to feed yourself, learning how to get insurance, learning how to fix something or who to call when something is broken in the household, owning tools for the first time. But a lot of the things you can actually just Google YouTube tutorials, you can Google the answer to a lot of the questions you'll have. However, I think living on your own is a heavier mental process than it is on like a practical learning level. I think for me, it was about learning how to be with myself and to enjoy my own company and to not romanticize the future. I'm going to bring it back to gender one time for the feminists because you already know that that's everything is rooted in our gendered and class and heteronormative upbringings, but anyways, I think that a lot of young girls are taught to learn, and not just young girls, I think this is just young people in general. We watch a lot of films, we watch a lot of TV shows, we read a lot of books. Even just in society, the norm is to get married and to have a partner and to live with someone that you will hopefully literally die with, grow old with. You want to share a home. Like the idea that comes from the very basic hetero idealization of the perfect adulthood, I think, is to find someone and then get married and then settle down. I think this can become a very destructive thing to look up to. Obviously, it's completely fine if you find someone you fall in love with and want to live with them and you are super compatible and can live together forever. Like, oh my God, that would be amazing. But I think the selling of the idea that you will have someone that you will live with for the rest of your life really prevents us from learning how to be okay with being alone. I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with completely living on their own and doing it for a long period of time. I think it's kind of socially acceptable when you're like in your early 20s or something, and then the minute you turn into your 30s, it's like if you're still living alone, if you're still living with roommates, if you're still bouncing from house to house that you don't own, suddenly it's like a social faux pas. And we internalize that, or at least I did. I really internalized the idea that, oh, one day I will be with my partner and we'll be slow dancing in the living room to our favorite music as we cook dinner together, and there's like a lovely glass of wine or just like a lovely tea brewing. I can't wait to like read with my lover in our little like book nook as we're looking out into the nature and trees are chirping. And like, do I still want someone that I could share my life with? Absolutely, if that's in the cards for me. But have I gotten to the point where that's not a necessity? Yes. Was it hard to get to this point? Absolutely. Do I still struggle and sometimes catch myself romanticizing things by imagining someone else in the picture and how that would be much more fun and cozy and meaningful? Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all a learning process here. But I do think that there's something to say about the fact that a lot of us think about, oh my God, wouldn't this be so cool if we would like, just literally, I would think about anything like cooking, driving, learning, reading, drinking tea, like doing my hobbies or going to the movies. Everything feels like it would be just so much better if I had someone with me there. And of course, it would be better if you had someone there who loves you and who could like match you in your sense of humor. However, I don't think that everybody needs to have somebody, and I don't think that we're healthy if we are in a position where we need someone there to rely on. I think it's completely okay and beautiful to want it, and I think that everybody deserves it. I just don't think that we should need it. I think it's an act of rebellion, and I think, unfortunately, it is a radical act to live your life as if you're not going to be a married woman and a mother. And I really think about this now where I'm in my 20s, and sort of like the default question that people ask me, especially when they're older, is like, oh, do you have a boyfriend now? Do you have a partner? Have you been dating? Are you thinking about settling down at all yet? And it's like, well, there is so much out there. There's so much life to live. And there's so much of me that I still need to get to know before I could even think about inviting someone into my space like that. And that is what I think is the most important thing about living alone. It's learning how to greet the voices in your head. Everybody has like negative voices, everybody has demons, everybody has baggage, and that's something that we need to learn how to heal alone and not do it in a codependent relationship. Living alone is really about having to pick yourself up out of bed when you have a really bad depressive episode, telling yourself to stop being mean to yourself when you just feel completely unproductive and you're sitting on the couch for the third day in a row. It's about being the one that has to say, okay, you know what, this is getting out of hand, and dedicate a whole day to just picking up after yourself. It's essentially becoming the adult that, now that we're living on our own, it is becoming our own parent. It's parenting our inner child, or reparenting our inner child for some of us. It's learning how to sit by ourselves in the quiet. Next is, how do you stop caring about what people think? And I think we can get really deep into this one and go about like spirituality, self-worth, deep mental healing, of course. But I think the most practical advice and response that I could give to this is the fact that not caring about what people think is kind of like a muscle that you have to train. That is it. the same way that I think handling rejection well is a muscle that we need to train, not caring about what people think will get easier and better, and you will do it with much more grace as you grow older and as you experience people's judgments more often. I think, of course, like healing and experience goes hand in hand because both should increase as you get older. However, when it comes to actually facing people's judgments, you have to be there for yourself in such a way that nobody else can. You have to be the one to convince yourself that what they're saying doesn't actually impact your self-worth. You have to be the one to convince yourself that your truth and your perspective is the right one that you want to believe in, because that's not something that anyone else can decide for you. It's only something that you can heal or believe in when you choose or when you feel like you're ready for it. I come from a cultural background where people really care about what other people think. A lot of Southeast Asian cultures are built upon the very fact of like caring what your neighbors are doing, what your cousins are doing, what your immediate family is doing, what your friends are doing. And I think it comes from a caring place originally, and people still believe that, but I think it's gotten completely out of hand. We get to the point where the first thing we say to each other when we see each other is how much weight we've gained or how much weight we've lost or how we look tired or how we look better than usual. We usually comment on each other's appearances. We usually gossip behind each other's backs. We judge other people's decisions, even though we love those people. And it's very difficult to let go of these things, especially when, you are going against the current or you're making decisions that are outside of the cultural norms. And trust me, as a outspoken intersectional feminist who is just a complete loudmouth all in all, I definitely go against the ideas that a lot of Javanese Indonesian people believe good Javanese Indonesian women should behave like. I think not caring about what people think really stems from, of course, the fact that we just love ourselves and believe in ourselves so much that we do not even allow other people's opinions to sway our perception. But honestly, I think once we start living our truths in them, that sounds super cliche, but literally like saying what we believe, doing things that we believe in, supporting causes that we believe in, when we stand up for the things that we feel like our innermost values are, that's when no one can touch you, essentially. For me, it's like, okay, you can criticize me for the things that I say, you can criticize me for the things that I do, but these are things that I absolutely believe in, right? Let's take it on a superficial level. If somebody criticized me for the way I dressed, I'd be like, well, I personally really like this style. And that's because I've worked hard to build enough confidence to wear things that maybe are a bit out there, but are completely catered to my tastes. So someone can tell me that they don't like it, and I'll be like, well, that's fine. They don't need to wear it. I'm not asking them to wear this. This is what's on my body because I like it on my body. If I didn't like the things that I wore on my body, I would probably get very insecure and I would start questioning myself and I'd think, oh my God, maybe I do have bad taste in fashion. This can go on a deeper level where, for example, if I was, I don't know, making a video online about feminism, right? Oh, no, let's take a real life example. I have a video up on the racism in the Netherlands that is often silenced and I think isn't talked about enough. And the amount of hate that I got on that video is absolutely appalling. I have grown old men, white dudes, anyone really, just anyone, calling me really bad words that I had never been called like by a person in real life before. I had people doubting my intelligence. I had people telling me to go back to wherever the hell I came from. And all of those things obviously freaking hurt the first time I read them, especially as a person who had never like received such blatant racist like verbal assault in real life. But never, not once, did I ever think I need to put that video down. I need to take it down because I firmly believed in what I was saying. Sure, maybe the way I spoke could have been more, I don't know, scripted or seemed more intellectual just for men to validate in a way that's more masculine. You know, all these rhetorics that a lot of people use to shoot women of color down. But for me, it was like, I don't care that this is the most unliked video on my YouTube channel. I don't care that this might mean that the algorithm won't like me. I don't care that maybe my future Dutch employers might see that video and see like, oh my god, she's really outspoken and she's really out there and people don't like it, because I firmly believe in the things that I said. Even the most basic sentences or the emotional reactions that I had in those videos, they completely reflected the frustrations that I felt at the time. I just don't, I'm not bothered by it, you know? After a while, you learn how to turn off the notifications, delete the notifications. Sometimes people delete comments or turn off comments. Like, after a while, you learn to build the muscle of saying, well, that's not my problem. And I think that's now my motto. Like, every time I feel like, oh, there's an egoic part of me that wants to stand up for herself and sort of like overspeak just so I can have the last word, I'll go, you know what? No, Selena, it is not your business what other people think of you. It is not your business, even if they wanted to make it your business. It's not, okay? As long as you're not hurting anybody, it is not your business. And that's where I'll end it. Honestly, like, this is a mantra that I've repeated to myself even when I felt like crying after someone has said something offensive to me and something that really hurt my feelings. I'll just repeat it in my head. It is not my business what other people think of me, and my God, does it work. Now, I have a couple of questions like, what will I be? Isn't it scary that after university you're free, like you officially become an adult? How do I withstand the pressure my parents and teachers have put on me? Honestly speaking, I grew up in a very strict household. Even if my parents weren't telling me to do certain things, I felt immense pressure. Like, I was facing really heavy depression, really bad anxiety. As a teenager, I often wouldn't like really leave the house. I didn't have a lot of strong friendships, and I was in a really mentally unhappy place. I was in a really shaky place. A lot of my self-worth depended on performing well at school, so I didn't really have an identity outside of what I had built in my academic life. Even the extracurriculars that I took sort of came from this need to compete with my peers, this need to be the perfect, well-rounded student, and, you know, like competing on college applications and stuff like that. So I completely feel the impending doomness of having to let go with the identity that you've built in school. I think that when you're a teenager, your whole life has just been what you've built in school. Because when you're at home, you have zero control. Even if you don't have strict parents, you know, you're still either in their household or in a guardian's household and under somebody else's care. And you're just not an adult. You can't make legal decisions until you're 18 or 21. A lot of things go into it. And we can go on and on about state rules and how children are mistreated, and how I think that a lot of parents are very under-equipped to have children. I think that we should actually, as a society, have a system where, like, you know, when parents are going to adopt kids, they have to go through like a system checkup where they have to make sure that your house is proper enough to raise a child in. They need to see your bank statements, they need to see your criminal record, they need to make sure that you are mentally stable enough to raise children. I think that people who are going to have biological children need to pass that kind of test before they can have them. Personal opinion, I think that a lot of cruelty and just horrible childhoods can be prevented with such a system. But regardless, coming from a kid who felt really suffocated, take it from me, I've learned that as you get older and as you start to leave the nest and as you start to prove that you can survive on your own, you will have way more freedom and control. And let me give you really good advice from a book that I've been reading, which I will talk at length about after this. It's easier to ask for forgiveness than for permission. And that is something that I wish I internalized as a kid, because I really stopped myself from doing really anything fun. Like I'm not talking about like underage drinking and getting into a car and driving to the other side of town to go out and sneak out. Like I'm not talking about like the dangerous things. I'm talking about the life decisions, like what you actually want to study, where you want to study, whether or not you want to go to college after high school. Things like which subjects you want to take, which levels of subjects. I know that when you're a teenager and when you're in a competitive like school system, those are the things that you worry about. And if I could have read this book, which is called The Art of Nonconformity by Chris Gabo, man, my life would have been very different, I feel like. I think I would have made a lot of decisions that catered more to me. Now I feel like I'm at a place where I always make decisions for myself, and I'm at a place where I have enough courage and have enough confidence in myself that I can say what I want to say or make the decisions that I want to make while keeping me in mind and my own best in mind instead of like having to take in the input from everybody, all of my peers and all of the elders around me. But truly, this book, The Art of Nonconformity, which is my top 5 books, I think, of 2020, completely rocked my world when I read it last year. It just completely shifted my tectonic plates. Like, not to be dramatic, but I've always been like, a teacher's pet, a rule follower. I've always, like, I was a really, really good student, overachieving, neurotic, sort of type A kind of kid. But it was really, really bad for my mental health. So when I was performing productively, I was that, and then when I was underperforming or when I felt bad about myself, I was like really, really deep, heavy, like depressive episodes, crying in the bathroom floor, like not being able to look myself in the mirror, controlling what I eat type thing. So truly, like being able to be an adult and make my own decisions, being able to quote unquote officially adult, learn new things. Like obviously it's terrifying doing my taxes for the first time, not a fun time, and I do it in a language that I'm not fluent in. Things like, oh my lord, fixing a flat tire, and I just have a bike, I don't even have a car. Or having to communicate with a boss that you feel like isn't treating you fairly, or having to communicate with professors that you feel like aren't treating you fairly. All these things have been terrifying to do, but it is so exciting and liberating to have that responsibility now. I think a lot of kids, when they're growing up, and I was as well, we were scared of like taking on the responsibility and finally having to answer for our own faults because we're not dependent on anyone anymore. But to me, it has been one of the most freeing aspects of being an adult, of deciding like, okay, I'm almost finished with my school now, I'm almost finished with my master's. After that, I could literally take any job that I want. I could live in any country that I'm eligible to live in. After reading The Art of Nonconformity, I'm at a point in my life where I'm just going to be a freelancer and I am going to live in the mountains in a cottage and I'm going to learn how to rebuild like an old winter cottage, or maybe I'm just going to travel all of Indonesia and completely familiarize myself with all of the communities there and learn all of the other Indonesian cultures that I was too privileged to learn about as a child. A lot of people like to do things like volunteering and, oh God, the volunteering like tourism industry is so horrible and destructive and neo-colonialist. But look at your own communities. Like I know even just in Jakarta, so many communities and nonprofit organizations and foundations that need support in order to support women, queer people, children, all of these communities that are vulnerable and that I care about. And these are the decisions that you can make on your own once you're an adult. The freedom to live your life the way you want to live. And I think that when you're a teenager, because you're still in your parents' household, you don't feel like you have that control and you feel like you're never going to have that control. I totally understand that. But read the book first and then give it a little bit of time. I promise you. Give it a little bit of time, read that book, change your mindset about how much control you actually have over your life, and I swear something, even the littlest thing, will definitely change. So that's all that I have for this episode. Thank you so much for listening in. Tune in for the next one where I answer the rest of your questions, and of course, I hope you have a great day wherever you are, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!